Today we're going to talk about pet trust. Last week I taught a class to other attorneys here in Oklahoma on pet trust, and I thought, why should they have all this information? So today I'm going to go over the same material with you. Welcome to 2 Minute Tuesday, where I attempt to discuss an estate planning topic in 2 minutes or less. So let's jump right into it. When I bring up the idea of a pet trust with folks, it gets quite a lot of laughs. But I think as our society is changing, people are becoming more and more attached to their pets. Whether they be dogs, cats, turtles, or whatever it is, people love their pets nowadays. Now, once I start speaking with clients about a pet trust, even if they were hesitant in the beginning, by the end of our discussion, they're usually telling me all kinds of provisions they want to provide for to protect their loving pet. If you're a pet owner, then one of the things we all dread is what life could be without our little buddy. However, few think about the life of our pets without us. You always hear crazy stories about this Hollywood celebrity or that Hollywood celebrity leaving millions of dollars to their little pet. And I think that has kind of given pet trusts a really bad name here in the United States. But the reality is that many of us love our pets just as much as we love our family. Sometimes even more. And that is completely understandable because our pets are our family. So today when we discuss estate planning, we advise that if you do love your pet like a child, then you should provide for them and protect them. We're not talking about leaving millions of dollars like you hear happens in Hollywood. However, you do want to look at two things when considering a pet trust to protect your pet. And I'll get into more detail here in a little bit, but there are kind of two areas that I like to focus in on with clients. The first is, who do you want to take care of your pet? Just like you should take the time to decide who is going to be your successor trustee or your power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, you should really look at and think about who you would want to care for your pet. It should be someone who will give your pet the same love that you give to them every single day. The second thing to consider is how much money you should leave to your pet. The best way that I've been able to figure this out is to actually make the calculation. Get out a piece of paper and figure it out. How much does it cost for food and medicine to take care of your pet on a monthly basis? And then what is that on a yearly basis? And then how much money do veterinary cost on a regular basis? Add those numbers together and multiply how many years you think your dog or your pet might survive you. And that'll give you a good estimate of what you need to leave. So that's a number we probably want to set aside in a trust specifically for your pet. Let's look at an example for our little buddy Snoopy.
So let's go to the board and look at what the costs are going to be to take care of Snoopy. So in this hypothetical, we are going to assume that Snoopy is going to live for an additional 6 more years. So first, let's look at how much it costs for food. Now, I had a dog about a year and a half ago pass away, and I was spending probably about $110. Actually, I was probably spending about $100 a month. So for this example, I assume cost of food has actually gone up a little bit. So let's look at $110 a month times 12 months. So that comes out to $1,320 a month in food. And then we need to look at veterinary costs of what it costs to take care of Snoopy on an annual basis to go to the veterinary, to the doctor. Now, probably in the beginning, when Snoopy's younger, it's not going to cost as much money. But as he gets older, he's going to have more costs. He's going to probably have to have medicine for his bone joints, and maybe some steroid shots and some other things. So I'm just going to come up with a number of $658 a year, and that should equalize over the 6-year period of what his cost would be. The third cost I think you should look at is, what kind of medicine are they taking? Are they taking heartworm and tick medications on a monthly basis? For my dog, I think we were spending about $54 a month on his heartworm and tick medicines. So let's multiply that out, and we come up with a number for a year of $648. Now, there's also, every time I went to the store or wherever I was and I saw something that I thought my dog would like, then I would usually get it for him. sometimes I probably wouldn't buy him anything in a month, but there'd be other months where I'd buy him a lot of stuff. And so just to kind of even that out, let's say that we spend an average of about $50 a month on just miscellaneous toys and water dishes and different things that we would like to get our dog to make them more comfortable. And multiply that out by 12 months, and we come up with $600. So the next thing is to add up all these numbers. So food, $1,320, plus vet costs of $658, heartworm and tick meds of $648, and then the miscellaneous toys and other things of $600. We come up with an annual cost of $3,226 for his annual cost to take care of Snoopy. Now, like I said earlier, we're talking about 6 more years of life for Snoopy after we pass away. And so if we multiply our annual cost of $3,226 times 6 more years, we come up with $19,356 to put aside for Snoopy. Now, again, these are just all estimates, but these are the kind of calculations that I like to go through with my clients so that they can come up with a number that is going to most accurately represent what they need to set aside for their pet, whether it's Snoopy, whether it's a dog, a cat, a turtle, or whatever it is. So in our example here, 6 more years of life, $19,356.
Now, there's a reason this is under $20,000, and we'll get into that in a moment. One of the questions that always seems to hit home is that if something happened to you right now, then what would happen to your dog waiting at home for you? Would anyone know to go check on your puppy? How long might it be before someone even remembers that you have a pet? And then what would happen to your pet? A couple of years ago, my neighbor's house almost burnt down to the ground. The fire department rescued their dog. The fire chief asked me if I would care for the dog until somebody stepped forward to take care of it. He was very blunt. He said that either me or a neighbor could take care of the dog, or the city would come and pick up the dog and take them to the dog pound. The ASPCA recently stated that every year approximately 500,000 cats and dogs enter shelters when their pet parents experience an emergency or that they pass away. I think most people just assume that their family or friends will step up to the plate and care for their pets. But unless we actually ask them, we never really know the answer. I have a good buddy that absolutely loves animals. He buys them treats, toys, anything for other people's pets. He will babysit someone's dog, but he will absolutely not take someone's pet on a permanent basis. You cannot just assume a family member or a friend will take your pet animal. An even bigger assumption is whether or not your beloved pet will go with that family member or friend. If your pet does not know the family member or person coming into your house, then the dog might behave aggressively. We've all seen this play out a million times, right? Someone has the sweetest dog in the world, but a stranger walks into the house and the dog goes wild. So we advise people to make certain that their dog is well acquainted with the person or persons who have agreed to take care of them if anything should happen to you. We also recommend that people create a pet dossier with pertinent and important information about your pet. If you would like a copy of one we give to our clients, then I'll provide a link in the comment section below. This pet dossier should include habits of your dog, food preferences, medical conditions, the medications that they take, veterinary information, their records, and behavior that they have with other pets and people. This is all important stuff that you might not know about. Keep a copy with your estate plan and make certain that the folks who have agreed to care for your pet have a copy of this same information. So now let's look at the law. I think one of the reasons courts have frowned on pet trusts in the past is because of the potential to violate the rule of perpetuities, that's a legal term, and because folks were leaving outrageous sums of money and there was no oversight on that money. So what would happen is unscrupulous trustees could live off of that money, and poor little Snoopy was getting ignored and left out in the cold weather. The other reason is there really were no laws in place for pet trusts. Well, that all changed in Oklahoma in 2010. The Oklahoma legislature passed Title 60, Section 199, titled as the validity of trust for the care of domestic or pet animals. I'll put a link to that statute in the comment section and the description sections below. Let's look at Section A. Right off the bat in the statute, it states that a pet trust is valid in Oklahoma, and just as important, that it terminates on the death of the animal that it's covering. This Section A, along with Section G at the bottom, states that the beneficiary of the trust shall include the caretaker for purposes of the rule against perpetuities. And again, that's a legal term, but you don't need to worry about it here. Section B provides that a pet trust can be liberally construed to carry out the general intent of the grantor. In other words, you want your dog taken care of. Sections C and D talk about who can be the trustee and the enforcer, and states that they cannot be the same person. Now, I'll discuss this in more detail when I go over a sample trust, but I actually like to have 3 separate parties as a trust. One is the enforcer, the trustee, and the actual caretaker. Now, Section E talks about accountings. And earlier, when we went over Snoopy's care, I said there was a reason it was under $20,000. And that is because of this Section E in the Oklahoma statutes. And I think if we have an enforcer, trustee, and a caretaker, then we're probably already getting a pretty good accounting of the trust. But this section requires an accounting if it is over $20,000. However, there might be situations when this could be really necessary. For example, what if instead of Snoopy only having 6 years left of life, that he was only a puppy when our client first, or when you first got him? So I think beagles live like 12 or 15 years. So if we use 10 years instead of 6 years, taking the amount of trust could be $32,000 just to take care of Snoopy over his lifetime if something were to happen to you. Section F provides one of the biggest requirements of any trust, and that is that there must be a remainder beneficiary in order for the trust to terminate. So now let's talk about what I like to put in a pet trust. And I guess I should note here that if a client wants a pet trust, then I make this as a section of their overall trust document. Other people do it different ways. It's just the way I like to do it. And like I said earlier, I prefer to have an enforcer, a trustee, and a caretaker. That way my clients know we have checks and balances in place to protect their pet. First, the caretaker is the individual who actually takes care of Snoopy on a daily basis. In our example, Snoopy lives with Charlie. The trustee is a separate individual that controls the money and distributes money to Charlie for the care of Snoopy. The third person I like to have is the enforcer. The enforcer watches over the books and makes certain that the trustee is distributing money to Charlie and that Charlie is actually taking care of Snoopy. So I like having these checks and balances so we don't end up with situations like you hear in the news with the trustee driving around a brand new Ferrari and poor Snoopy is again starving and outdoors in the cold. So now let's talk about mistakes people usually make with pet trusts. And I've gone over these in more detail in this video up here. The first is putting too much money in the pet's care. And I think if you make the calculations like we talked about earlier, then you'll be in great shape. You don't want to end up in a situation where the money is tied up in the estate for years and you end up penalizing your other beneficiaries as well. The second mistake is providing vague or unenforceable instructions. That is why we work with our client to create a detailed pet dossier so there's no question what kind of care your pet should be receiving. The third mistake is failing to keep information up to date. So let's say Bill sets up a pet trust for his dog, and then that dog passes away and he gets a new dog named Gypsy. Well, if he hasn't provided specific instructions for the new dog, then Gypsy could be left out in the cold just like Snoopy. The fourth mistake we see is not having a contingency plan. You might have trusted a friend or a loved one, somebody in your family, to care for your pet. But what happens if that person is unable, they die, or they're simply unwilling to take care of your pet all of a sudden? Just like we set up contingencies for your trustees, we need to have a backup caretaker and trustee to take care of Snoopy. Well, that's all for today. I hope you got value. And if you did, please hit the like button below. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. And as always, I hope you have an awesome week. We'll see you next time, and thanks again.